Sure.
Okay, call the Tremont Planning Board meeting of Tuesday, June 22nd to order at 5:03. We have in attendance myself, Mark Good, Marjorie Buck. Oh, we're on Zoom, so please acknowledge it.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, Jeff Young.
Here.
Okay, and we don't, Lawson, are you with us yet? I guess not. So hopefully they'll join us late. I don't think there's a need to excuse the absences.
No,
Okay.
not yet.
So let's move on. Anybody have any feelings about adjusting the agenda? Looks fine to me. I would have suggested moving 7A after B and C, but I think we're going to have to table that anyway.
Yeah.
So that should be pretty quick. The minutes for June 8th, everybody get a chance to look them over?
They look good to me.
Jeff?
Yeah, they look fine to me.
Okay, I'll take a motion to approve the minutes of June 8th.
So moved.
Second,
Motion and a second on the table to approve the minutes of June 8th, 2021. All in favor, Marjorie,
aye.
Jeff,
Aye.
and myself, yes. Okay. Next, we're going to open the public hearing, but I have a question. Since Marjorie's been recusing herself on this, should we wait till we get joined by somebody else?
I think it would be wise to. I'll move that we move the matter to later in the adjournment and in the agenda.
Okay, I guess we can do that. And Marjorie can certainly do the planning board application and the Seal Cove Auto Museum. So you want to make a motion to take those first and then go back to the public hearing?
I also move.
And I second it. Or can I
Okay.
second it?
Yes. I
Yeah,
think we can.
motion and a second on the table to move the public hearing until after 7A and B. All in favor, Marjorie?
Yay, yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Okay. So the planning board application, site plan review, town of Tremont, paving the existing gravel area in front of the salt and sand shed in the north entrance. We're waiting for Greg to get back to us on that, so we need
That's
to
correct.
table that. Yep. Greg, you think you'll have that for our next meeting, or? Greg?
Mark,
Yes.
yep, sorry, I was having audio. Yes, we should. I mean, we just met with the town manager last week to understand the scope and exactly what was needed. You know, the project was out to bid per design prior to our involvement. So it has to be a pretty deliberate effort on what we're proposing, particularly when we're dealing with DEP regulations and salt. So, but it can be ready for the next meeting.
Great.
I have good understanding of what has been requested, and so I just need to execute it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep.
Okay, I'll take a motion to table 7A
So moved.
until the next meeting.
And I second that.
Motion and a second on the table to table 7A until our next meeting. All in favor, Marjorie?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Okay. Planning board application, site plan review, Seal Cove Auto Museum. If you folks have read the memo on this, that they had, we found the application incomplete. They had either 30 days to come back to us with a complete application or another application or a more complete application, or, oh, Lawson's joined us, great.
Yep.
And,
Sorry I'm late, everybody.
Let's recognize that Lawson's here at 5:08 PM. Okay, Lawson, just to catch you up, we were waiting for you to join us before we began the public hearing. And we've tabled the paving project until Greg has the information for us at our next meeting.
Great.
And we're now on the planning board application of site plan review for Seal Cove Auto Museum. Okay.
Great.
So
Yep.
it's saying they had 30 days to come back to us, or else within that time frame to ask us for an extension. And they have not done so. So under our ordinance, we have to find that deny the permit, and hopefully they'll come back to us at some other time. So I'll entertain a motion to deny the application for the Seal Cove Auto Museum paving project as the application is incomplete.
Should we say the application hasn't been completed within the 30-day time limit?
You can. I was just using Jesse's suggested motion. That might be better. Sure. Would you like to do that? Make that motion?
I so move.
And I second it.
Okay. We have the motion and a second on the table to deny the application for Seal Cove Auto Museum paving project as the application is complete because they didn't come back to us within the 30-day period. All in favor? Marjorie?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Lawson, where are you? There you are.
Yes.
And myself, yes, unanimous. Okay, now Lawson's here. Marjorie, you can recuse yourself on this.
I recuse myself from
Okay,
here out.
thank you. Well, no, you can come back at the end on.
Oh, I'm
the
gonna
second-
listen.
on
anyway.
8 CEO issues. Okay, you can come back then. So, okay, I take a motion to open the public hearing on Acadia Wilderness Lodge Campground.
So moved.
We have a second, Lawson.
Second.
Lawson,
Yes. Can you hear me? I second it.
yeah. Okay, motion is second on the table to open the public hearing for Acadia Wilderness Lodge Campground. All in favor, Lawson,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
myself, yes. Okay. And as you folks know, that the applicant has once again asked for a continuance of this until July 27th. So I'll take a motion to continue it on July 27th at 5 PM via Zoom again.
I'll make the motion, but then we should discuss it a little bit. So
Sure.
I'll make a
We need
motion. that
motion
we-
to discuss it, so,
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we continue, extend, what's the verb?
Continue.
Continue the public hearing for the Acadia Wilderness Lodge application until July 27th at 5 PM via Zoom.
Second.
Okay, motion is second on the table to continue the public hearing for Acadia Wilderness Lodge Campground to July 27th, 2021 at 5 PM via Zoom. Any discussion?
Yes, I have a question as just as to procedure here. I thought the last time we discussed this, that we agreed on a timeline for submissions by the applicant and responses by anyone who might want to respond in the neighborhood and the community, et cetera. And I thought we agreed to a 2-week, 1-week time limit, 2 weeks before the meeting for the applicant, 1 week before for any other comments, adverse or support. And I read in the emails, I think I interpreted them correctly, that they're meeting with the neighbors again on the 19th of July. And I'm just not quite sure if they're gonna meet on the 19th and they're gonna make some changes, how they can make the 2-week requirement for the 27th of July.
That's correct. They would not be able to, if you want to keep that condition.
And I know that I'm gonna be out of town on the 27th. And unavailable. I mean, I could, and so I'm a little bit worried about having a quorum on the 27th. And I'm not sure we need to necessarily schedule this around our schedules, but since I know that I'm gonna be out of town that week, it seems at least relevant to put that out there. And then, okay, and then my other sort of question, I think, for the board has to do with the process, and I want to make sure that we're, I mean, I don't know, like, is there any obligation that we have to sort of move things along, or can we continue extending this public hearing indefinitely? I mean, is there some sort of legal motivation that we should be trying to like close this process and move it to the next stage, or is it okay for us to keep extending it and extending it and extending it? Jeff and Mark, do you guys have thoughts on that?
I don't know what, I think as long as we continue to have cooperation between our board and the applicant, we can move it around with some flexibility. I think it becomes a possible potential legal issue if there's an objection to us moving by the applicant, or we want to do something contrary to they think it's to their interest. So if the applicant's on board, I think we can be pretty flexible. Is that right, Jesse?
That's correct. Last time, when this first came up, we spoke with the legal counsel, Diane O'Connell, and she had basically said that as long as they were requesting and it was agreeable to the board, it was fine to continue. You would get into some trouble if you chose to ignore their request, or as you said, if they were unwilling to agree to the date that you selected. But as long as it's mutually agreed upon, there's no real time limit issue.
If I might add for Mr. Chairman,
Sure.
a couple of things. You know, the ordinance does say as mutually agreed between planning board and applicant. So we either have to agree for that clause to invoke or something else happens. So hopefully we're mutually agreeing to a future said date. We had suggested the 27th. However, I believe the 14-day submittal of any new information was actually a vote, right? So unless there was a reconsideration, if we were going to have to hold to that, we would probably have to request that date certain as the 10th, I think would be the next one, which Wilson would be available for. And I think it's important to have an informed board. That's just my quick look at it. And certainly all that being said is I think we had we'll have to look at what the substance of any changes that have come out of the neighborhood meetings, and we're going to be happy to discuss those with the board. I think that we've done a lot of discussion about RVs. We've been a lot of discussion about distances between what is neighborhood versus activity stuff. And so we want to have the right time, follow the right timeline to bring that back to the board. So if that means the 10th, without having to reconsider that vote on the 14th, I think that's probably better for everybody, considering the board and considering everybody's timelines. I mean, part of the reason why we're doing this is it's been tough to coordinate our team, plus making sure abutters who want to be either in person or electronically can all meet these meetings. So, I think that with a little bit of flexibility with the board, I think the process can unfold in a way that keeps what we started, but also, continues logically. So I would be suggesting the 10th, based on what I heard tonight, and probably how I know it would unfold, at least on our side, as far as getting everybody organized, because we've had certain trouble doing so.
Hold on 1 second. I see Brett has joined us. I want to recognize that Brett has joined us at 5:17 p.m. Welcome, Brett. There he is. Hey, so Greg, do you anticipate making some changes to your application
So what I would say that
as a result of the public, of your meetings with the community?
Yeah, I think the answer to that is yes, Mark. I think the whether those in the view of the board are substantive enough to warrant, I mean, let's get to the issue. Are those changes substantive enough to warrant a new application? That's what the board and everybody's wondering. I would love to be able to sit here and tell you everything about every one of those, but I think our first sort of roundtable discussion was, sort of a good way to absorb it, and we haven't been able to react to that. We even on foot have met with several neighbors in the neighborhood too, to specifically address them, and they've been somewhat open in discussing different elements of what can happen. So in aggregate, can I say, is it not this or going to be that? I couldn't do that at the moment because I don't think that'd be fair to the process we've set out with the neighborhood meetings. We've said, hey, we're listening, we're doing these things. We want to go back and gauge whether or not some marks are good. And we've also got a market analyst with our clients. Like our clients have a vision that has to be successful. That's going to take time, and the board's going to be obviously part of the discussion of whether or not this meets the test of a new application or may continue under the current one. And I forthright don't have a complete answer for that now, but it will be a big part of our discussion, I'm sure.
Okay, so to that point, I agree totally with Jeff. We need to get whatever changes you're making in plenty of time to, with the deadlines that we set previously. And so how does that work out? August 10th meeting then?
Yeah,
You think you can make that, Greg?
Sure, the 10th then means any substantive changes. I'm just looking at there is July, whatever that is.
27th, I think.
27th.
And so it basically gives you a week after the public meeting or the neighborhood
Yeah.
session, whatever you're calling it, on the 19th.
Knowing what I know now, I think it's possible. I know we'll be there on the 10th, and if the changes are in, we'll have plenty to discuss at the 10th. So I think that that's possible.
What do you
So-
think, board?
Well, I mean, that all seems to make sense to me. I guess I just wanted to ask one question that I think I know the answer, but I want to make sure that I ask the question, which is, since most of this interaction is between the applicant and the board and making sure that the applicant and the board agree with the timeline and all of that. Does the public have any say or right in terms of this process, given that we're in the middle of a public hearing? And it's kind of hard, the public doesn't have one voice. There's nobody to speak on the public's behalf. So I guess it's more of a sort of.
We do, Blossom. That's our role.
And so if we're okay with it, we're speaking on behalf of the public and we're saying that it's okay for the public hearing to extend another however long.
Yeah, we just need to provide them with ample notice of when the public hearing is occurring.
Great.
And
Okay.
that's their chance.
Okay. That makes sense.
So I did see Mr. Katsifikas and Mr. Pelleggi somewhere, though he seems to be gone. Let me ask those two people, what do you think? Are you okay with that sort of timeline?
Speaking for my clients, yes, I'm fine with that.
Okay,
Who's speaking?
That's Jim Katsifikas. I'm sorry. We're
I
speaking
thought it was
for,
Dan. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
thanks.
Hi,
Dan?
this is Dan Pelleggi. It's gonna mess with my vacation time, but it's gonna be fine. It'll, for my clients, moving this to the 10th will work just fine.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Well, board, unless there's some more discussion, I'll take a motion to amend our
Yeah,
motion.
so I made the original motion and I'll amend my motion to schedule the public hearing for Acadia Wilderness Lodge for August 10th, Tuesday, August 10th at 5 o'clock by Zoom.
Tuesday, August 10th.
Yep.
Tuesday.
Okay,
Could,
do I have a second?
Paulson, would you add into that, just say, and maintaining the previous filing deadlines?
Yes, and maintaining the previous filing deadlines of 2 weeks for the applicant and then 1 week response from the public, I suppose, if there's any organized response. So that's all part of the packet. So that we agreed upon previously. I don't remember what date that was, but.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second,
Okay, motion and a second on the table to continue the public hearing on August 10th 5 PM via Zoom, and that all previous filing deadlines are met. Correct, Lawson?
Yes.
Okay. Have a vote. Jeff,
Yes,
Lawson,
Yes.
Brett,
Yes.
myself, yes. Okay, I'll take a motion to close the public hearing.
No, you just continued it.
Well, okay, so we don't close
you're
it,
done.
okay.
Yep.
Okay, well, we're done. Okay, so now we're moving on to C, 7C, Planning Board Application Site Plan Review, Pointy Head Campground. And as I mentioned with the Seal Cove Auto Museum, Pointy Head failed to meet we found their application incomplete, and they failed to meet the 30-day deadline or for coming back to us or asking for an extension. So I'll take a motion to deny the application on that basis.
so moved.
I'll second.
Motion and a second on the table to deny the application for Pointy Head Campground as the application is incomplete and because they failed to come back within the 30-day deadline. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. Lawson,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes,
Brett,
Yes.
myself, yes. Okay. We got through all that. Next up, CEO issues. Jesse, it's your turn, and I should say CEO and town manager now. Jesse Dunbar.
Do I come back?
Yes, you
Yes.
can come back, Marjorie, sorry, yeah. Site plan review ordinance discussion. You want to fill us in?
Yes, so the update on that was just that Attorney James Collier said he should be able to get a draft combining the land use ordinance and the site plan review ordinance to us by the end of July. It'll be tight, but he said he can do it by the end of July. So once I have that from him, we'll get it on the agenda.
Great. That's much better than doing the Band-Aid approach that we previously talked about,
Mhm.
I think. Any comments from the board?
And that gives us time if we have it by the end of July. Because that's the one that the select board has to hold a public hearing for.
Yes, I need to confirm with James when he's back in the office because it's a little tricky because the site plan review ordinance is the one that requires the select board public hearing 14 days prior, et cetera. However, is it really an amendment to it because we're putting it in land use? So we're really repealing it and amending land use. So it's a legal question for James once he's back in the office. Does
I
it
see.
still need to follow the amendment procedures for site plan when it's being repealed? So we'll leave that legal question to James.
Yeah.
And selectmen did volunteer to hold a additional meeting in August if we
Yes.
do have to meet that deadline.
Okay.
If we
Yes.
can't do it earlier, so.
And James also did point out the fact that if for some reason you couldn't meet the deadlines for November 2nd, the select board could choose to call a special town meeting at any date. So, November 15th, if that's what worked. So there's some options.
We okay, board? Any questions, comments? Okay, let's move on to discussion of draft campground changes for land use ordinance. As you know, at our last meeting, we discussed possibly making some changes to the campground standards. And just wondering if anybody had any ideas, whether we can actually meet the deadlines to do this. Don't all speak up at once.
Mr. Chairman, I thought we were talking about campground, but I thought we would be also raising other issues that we thought should be addressed other than just a campground issue within our ordinances. Am I incorrect about that?
Seemed like campground was the big thing, but yes, we did
Yeah.
also mention that, I believe.
Well, for the purposes of starting conversation, I have 4 thoughts.
Okay.
Campground is one, as to should we have our town attorney give us some drafts of various ways of describing what campground mean and how we could consider putting a definition that's more useful in our ordinance. That's number one. Number two, I think one of the issues that I have seen wrestled with by, we haven't even really wrestled as a board, but the public has been wrestling with the word light commercial in our ordinances and what it means or doesn't mean. And I'm wondering whether we can have the same approach to the word light commercial within our ordinances and have our town attorney give us some suggestions as how to define that better than implying or using common sense or a reasonable way of looking at it, but having a more precise way of looking at it. I also looked at our current comprehensive plan. This is item number 3, our comprehensive plan, and it discusses future land use as to the RB zone, and the comprehensive plan suggests it be reduced in area, concentrating it in a certain area of the town and not as broad as it presently is. And there's a map, which I don't have a copy of at the moment in front of me, of what they suggest of reducing it. I think we might want to look at that. And lastly, also in the suggestion of future things in the comprehensive plan, it suggests that we should consider impact of activities on a site in an RV zone as to off-site issues of noise, traffic, odors, water, etc. And so those are 4 items I would think we might want to look at. And there are all items that I've seen raised by many of the letters that have come in and concerns, and we are in some respects hand-tied to address some of them. And otherwise, this would give us a better way of looking at applications in the future.
Jeff, can you say the 4th one again? I missed the part of it, I think, about
The 4th one,
offsite impacts.
Yeah, if you look on page 114 L1, it talks about minimizing impact of off-site effects that a development would have on-site. So that means you can address things like pollution and water and maybe even wells and septic, and does it affect neighbors' wells, traffic, etc. Right now, our traffic, the way our present code's being looked at as our traffic is concentrated within the site and on road clicks out of the catalog, out of the manual. And so our comprehensive plan suggests it being broader, that we can consider off-site things as to impacts on the items I mentioned.
Would you include light and noise as potential off-site impacts?
Would I what?
Include light and noise?
Well, I'm a strong believer in the dark skies concept, so I certainly put that.
Okay, all right. I just want to make sure I'm
falls in the
wrapping my
same
head around it.
category.
Great. Okay. All right.
And you don't think our current lighting standards in the ordinance are good enough to cover that?
I'm not sure when it comes to this type of development in the RV zone.
Well, it's interesting you brought up light commercial, because I did ask Jesse to ask James about that. And James is on vacation, get his opinion. I mean, certainly the mixed use in the RB zone is an issue. And we have no definition for light commercial, but I did some looking around and I don't find it anywhere in any towns, basically. I did find in the Lemoyne Shoreland zoning ordinance, they do have a definition for light commercial uses. It's commercial uses which, because of the limited effects of traffic, noise, dust, fumes, vapors, odors, hours of operation, or other conditions, can coexist compatibly with residential and recreational uses. But other towns our size don't. I found in some larger cities, they might have a light commercial district, but their definitions within light commercial districts or what's allowable in a light commercial district, we would probably think of as heavy commercial use, you know, could be small malls and things like that. And I don't think, a lot of towns do have light and heavy industrial, but but a campground isn't industrial. We could be doing, let's say, Jackson Lab decide to move over here. Instead of going to Ellsworth, they came over here. We'd be dealing with some of these same issues that we're dealing with at the campground, I would think. And in that case, because they're institutional, they wouldn't have to deal with buffering standards, something that needs to be strengthened in our ordinance, if you ask me. So I don't know. I don't know where to go with this. I raise it as a question.
Yeah. I mean, I'll just share my view. I know there's been a lot of comments and a lot of feedback and from the public on the on this campground application. And we've talked about, and I agree that as currently promulgated, the rules are pretty light and there's just not a lot. But I also think that things like light commercial use, you don't have to define everything. I mean, people know it when they see it. I mean, there's a sort of a famous quote by one of the Supreme Court justices of certain kinds of material, when you know it when you see it, and you know when it's art. And so
we know what you're talking about. We know what you're talking about. Yeah, go ahead.
So you kind of know it when you see it. But to Jeff's larger point about the comprehensive plan, and I understand where he's coming from. I come at it from a little different perspective, I guess, because I'm on the task force. And I view that comprehensive plan now from 2010 as just a stale document. I don't think you can rely on that anymore. It's 11 years old, and we're about ready to embark on the issuance of a public survey, and here pretty shortly. And I'm not sure. I mean, I at least from my perspective, if we want to address campgrounds, that specific issue that's arisen, fine. But anything broader than that, I would caution us relying on or looking to a document that's now 11 years old when we're just about to refresh that document and get some feedback from our community as part of that public survey in the next 5-6 months.
I agree about, I would really be against making any major zoning changes before the new comprehensive plan is done. Attacking certain issues like the campground standards in the ordinance, or maybe even light commercial, and I'm not even sure about that. I'm kind of on the fence there. I could see that, but as far as the future uses of the RB zone, I think wait till the plan is actually, the new plan is done.
Mark, we're a long ways away from a comprehensive plan that would come before us approved and workable and start drafting new ordinances. It's 5 and 6 months is not realistic for a working document to come forward. And whether it's stale or not, it's the only document that we have, one. Two, as you pointed out at the last meeting, it's specifically referenced to in our own ordinances that we should be doing things that have been pointed out in it. And so I think for a Band-Aid approach, and I hate Band-Aid approaches, but for this period of time between now until we get a working document, we can draft ordinances off the new working document of the new comprehensive plan. We should take what we have. It's the only thing we have, and we have an obligation to look at those things, whether it's 10 years or 20 years old. We have that obligation. Nothing dismisses us or releases us from that obligation.
I disagree. If we've had that obligation's been in place for 11 years, and what we have right now is exactly what the people wanted, and that's what we have. And so, and what we have to work with are the current rules. And I just don't think if you're going to talk about a wholesale change and addressing the RB, I'll call it the RB issue, look, if it's 2 years down the road, I would rather wait and let this process play out that's in place right now and have that current information and operate the way we are for the next 2 years, rather than act on something that's 11 years old that may or may not reflect what people really want in the town. You know, frankly, if that's what people really wanted, the changes you're talking about, Jeff, they would have happened by now. It would have happened by now, and it hasn't. So I think that alone tells us a lot.
You raised that exact point in our last meeting, and I hear what you're saying, but the same token, the world is changing rapidly and we are slow to catch up. And there are a few things we can look at. I'd like to finish. There's a few things we can look at that were authorized by that comprehensive plan, that were agreed to, and that has not been done. And it might be a timely time at least to get that in, as I mentioned, as a Band-Aid approach until your committee comes forward with the new document, which we'll be thrilled to see and excited to work with. But we have problems facing us now. And further delay is just, I think, problematic for the town.
I guess I
Can you
see all the problems, but
go ahead, Brett?
I guess I don't see all the problems. I see, we have one application before us right now that certainly raised a lot of interest about a campground. And there are certainly a lot of folks that come out against that. I think, but what you end up with is sort of things like this. So what you don't get are the people who might feel a different way potentially about the RB zone that aren't near that campground, which we'll pick up in the public survey. So it's, to take and extrapolate from the comments on this particular campground that's generally about the RB, I think it's a non sequitur. Because when you have a particular project, you're going to have people very activated, very motivated about that particular project, but that may live by it. But folks in another part of that community that might have a different view about what light commercial use is, let's say, they're not necessarily going to speak up. That's what the public survey is designed to do. That's what we're doing right now. And it's the last thing I'll say. I would just encourage us to be, if we think there's an issue with the campground rules, I think there is. Let's address that. But any more comprehensive, larger review of the rules should be part of the task force that's on the work that they're doing right now.
Jeff, can you be more specific about this Band-Aid approach? I'm not sure I understand it.
Well, as Brett points out, yes, there's been a lot of stirring up on this one campground, but we don't have any tools to address future requests between now and any changes should they come in. And even the Pointy Head application also raised a fair amount of issues and comments by the public. So we've actually had two, not one. And as I mentioned in the last meeting, the world's changing rapidly around us, and we're not doing enough to keep up with it. And what's clear to me in the comprehensive plan that exists presently from 2011, and from many letters that are written, there's a strong desire that there's a love for the quiet side view, the rural atmosphere of this side has been a big issue for both full-time residents and part-time residents. And there's risks that this could be severely damaged if we don't get something in place that we can look at these applications in a light that preserves some of the charge that's been given to us by the previous comprehensive plan.
But basically who we've been hearing from are people who are fired up over the campgrounds. And we're not hearing from people about who don't care about the campgrounds, or they don't care or about the town in general. And that's what, or the RB zone in general. And that's what the comprehensive plan task force is trying to find out, I think.
All four of my points I raised have been raised around the current applications and issues that are raised in letters and comments and so forth from the public. I haven't gone extensively to change a lot more in our zoning. I'm addressing campground related type issues that have come up.
Lawson or Marjorie, you have any thoughts?
I think we ought to try to put a pause on all of this until we do figure out some things. which is what you tried to get done, Mark, and it didn't pass with the select board.
Marjorie, are you suggesting a pause on development or a pause on changes to the ordinance, or what are you suggesting that we pause?
Well, like, I think that the Hopkins are doing their best by seeing people's input, but we don't have a lot of definitions down to, as Jeff said, what light commercial is. We don't have a police presence. We don't have a fire department presence. We don't know what this impact is going to do even on the aquifers. We have nothing in our provisions to say, we need to see this. And so I'm thinking that all of this needs to slow down a bit and until we find out some more data, but
So I think what you're saying, Marjorie, I just want to understand, you're suggesting that we slow down this sort of application review process and development process as a,
yes.
okay. All right, I just wanted to make sure that I'm understanding what you're suggesting.
How would we do that?
I don't know.
You can have a moratorium on everything. We couldn't get a moratorium on campgrounds.
I know.
We tried twice.
And I'm not going to be here. Yay. Sorry. But Kevin's broken down in Frederick, Maryland, and it's my fault, I hear. So pause.
Lawson? I know you have some thoughts on this.
Yeah, although nothing's like super well formed. So, but I guess because I feel like sort of there are multiple things are true at the same time, and I'm not quite sure how to reconcile them. I think Jeff's point about like we have a comprehensive plan and that gives us direction, and like that resonates a lot with me. And I think that it is in place until it gets updated, and we're in the process of updating it, but we haven't updated it yet, and we won't for a while, like at least more than a year, I think, before we'll have a draft of a document that is sort of official. And so we do have a document that gives us some direction. That's true. Also, once the new comprehensive plan comes out, I expect that will also give us some direction. And if the direction that comes out of the comprehensive plan is somewhat substantial and suggests changing of zoning or changing of land use provisions, then I'm hoping that sort of the public, our community, has the capacity to really engage in a thorough revision process. And so part of me feels like it makes sense to, if we're gonna like do a thorough revision of the land use ordinance, well, let's do that with a newer comprehensive plan. The other confusing thing for me is that if we go forward to try to make changes to this existing land use ordinance and suggest some changes about offsite impacts from on-site development, or suggest some changes that redefine the RV zone or redefine the permitted uses within the RV zone, then that would go, and if like assuming that we're very fast and efficient and it gets on the ballot for November, that ends up happening at the exact same time that we're doing the public survey for the comprehensive plan and other sort of public hearings for the comprehensive plan. And I'm a little bit worried about this sort of confusion, the community confusion around, like, if we make changes to the land use ordinance in November, then what are we responding to with the comprehensive plan? And it starts to feel a little bit hard to parse out, even for me, who sits on both the comprehensive plan and the planning board. And if it feels complicated to me, for the public who I want to be engaged, empowered, and be able to sort of follow along this process and contribute, I get worried about how easy or accessible that process will be.
So One thing to keep in mind is we have a deadline, a very strict deadline we have to meet. To make any wholesale changes, I don't see how we could do that before November. Jesse, what do you think?
I think it would be difficult.
I think stick to minor changes now, and if we, and take this to discussion further, if we want to, and aim for the May town meeting, if anything. And I have some of the same concerns as about the comprehensive plan, the new version as well. I mean, we're asking certain questions based on the way things are now. If we change things where those questions or they're no longer valid, maybe, I don't know, just like Lawson pointed out.
Yeah, I mean, you're asking people questions based on the status quo. And if you start
Yes.
changing the status quo while you're asking people questions on a moving target.
Right.
Yeah, and look, I'll just say it. I mean, let's just get right down to what's going on here. As a general matter, what we're talking about is likely restricting or changing landowner rights such that they can probably do less, right? I mean, that's what we're talking about. And I just think that when you, and I totally understand the perspective of, you know, it's the quiet side. We don't want, you know, we want to keep that way of life. But the flip side is there are people that bought that land. Well, the counterpoint to that side is, well, that's great. But when you bought that land, you knew exactly how it was zoned, or you could know. And so you knew that people could do those things. And then the flip side is people who bought land over there purposefully so that they could do things with that land and earn revenue, you're going to be taking away potentially their rights. So I think if we're going to do that, we need to do that with understanding exactly what people want right now. And that's what we're going to be asking them through this task force and the survey. And look, we may end up in the same place. I just think if we should do it in a way that reflects the best data we have, rather than a document that issued in 2001. It might, like I said, we might end up in the same place. We might move even further in terms of limiting the commercial or you know, use and whatnot. But I just feel like we shouldn't try to do too much. We should use a rifle shot approach. If there are issues we want to plug with the campground piece, let's do that. I mean, that's what's been before us. That's what's generated a lot of the feedback. And I would keep the larger question to you know, to when we can get that feedback from the public survey.
Makes sense to me.
Right,
Jeff?
which issues would you feel is appropriate for us to address on the campground issues of an application?
You know, it's a good question because, you know, what I've been struggling with, a couple of things. I live here too. There's a campground right down the road. So it's funny, you hear people, I've heard some complaints in the letters about the smoke fire, the campfire. I love it. I love smelling the campfire. So it's interesting. I'd have to, and I have no issues with the folks down the road. And you know, there's a rock crusher across the way. It's been there and makes noise. When I moved here, people asked me to join forces and try to shut it down. I'm not going to do that. People want to, you know, they were there, they're earning a living off their land. I get it. There are a lot of folks that have been here for years. What they had was land, and that's how they earn their living. So I don't know. I think what I've been thinking about the most recent application, you know, you take it and you make it, when you make it small, this is how I think about it. Well, if you make it smaller, right, and people are okay with it, so I guess is the light commercial use in that concept, does it apply to the activity itself, or does it apply to the size of the activity? Or can you, you know, because if I think if you had a small nuclear site over there, that'd be a problem. But if you had a large, you know, bird watching facility, it probably wouldn't be. So it's to me, the campground it's a function of it's not necessarily the activity itself. It's how, at least in my view, because if you had that, and I'm just talking out loud here, if you had all that land and you put 10 campsites in there, I'm not sure anyone would have a problem with that. Maybe they would, I don't know. But you take that and you punch it out to a larger project and you start getting some volumes, and then and then I can understand where, you know, I don't necessarily agree with all the comments, but I understand them. And so I think that it is that concept of light commercial use. I personally, I think I could probably figure it out. I know it when I see it, but that would be one way to look at it. It's whether is it the activity itself, or is it the extent of the activity, or the the scale of the activity on the land, or something like that.
So what you're really talking about is impact.
Yeah. Or yeah. I guess that's what it is.
Yeah, we have no definition for impact, and how do we define that? How do we say this is a low impact, this is medium impact, this is a heavy impact?
Well, it's just like
I have no idea.
want the porridge to be just the right temperature, and then we can figure it out.
We're going to go back to the definition of pornography here, and it's like, I know when I see it.
I feel like at the end of the day, that's part of what we're supposed to do.
Brett, I like the spectrum, or the axis of, there's like a scale axis and then a impact axis,
Yeah.
and like you're okay with a rock crusher across your street, but if it was 10 times the size, maybe not.
If it were a massive SD Warren granite quarry with 10 crush, it's like, yeah.
Right. Like, okay, let's, and I mean, or more to the point, there's a campground across the street from your place. You're okay with that, but maybe, and we have not decided yet, but maybe something 10 times the size,
Maybe.
cross the threshold. I don't know. Mark, I like your definition, or Lemoyne's definition of light commercial. And so I guess one proposal, maybe we suggest that we incorporate that into our definitions. And I think it's also useful for me to remind myself that we aren't necessarily making this decision. We're making a recommendation, putting this before the voters, and asking our community, are we ready to define light commercial in this way?
I'll say one thing about the Lemoyne definition. It's subject to interpretation as well.
Of course.
I mean, okay, because the limited commercial uses which, because of the limited effects of traffic, noise, dust, fumes, vapors, odors, hours of operation, or other conditions, can coexist compatibly with residential and recreational uses. So I live next to a boatyard, okay? They get traffic, they haul boats in and out. I hear the beep, beep, beep of the backup alarms all the time. I don't smell vapors and odors, but if I got close enough, I could, having worked in boatyards. And so to me, it's not a problem, but to somebody else living right where I live, it might be a problem, and they might see this. I don't know.
But I think to Brett's point, that's why there's a planning board. That's why, that's our role, to sort of help figure out if the boatyard is too big, or if the rock crushers are too loud. And I mean, not, mostly it's about applications. So if the rock crushers are going to be too loud, or if the boatyard is going to be too big. But
yeah, I mean, it'd be great if we can make everything objective. If it was just a number, and you either met the number or you didn't, but it's not. And you can do a lot of that, I think. But at the end of the day, some of these things are going to be a judgment call, unless you say, look, on this island, you can't have a campground on so many acres that has any larger than, so many sites. And you could try to do it that way. But otherwise, you're always going to end up with some of these measures that are, at the end of the day, going to be a judgment.
The judgment call measures are the ones that get difficult. And if you look at our checklists on both our site plan and our planning board and our subdivision ordinances, they all go into, Jesse gives us a checklist of the standards to go through, and we go through at every meeting these checklists. And when you have these, I'll call loosey-goosey words like light commercial, they don't even make it to the checklist, because there's no standards that we can apply to say, yeah, this does qualify as a light commercial activity, or it doesn't qualify. And judgment calls get turned over in courts regularly. And so we need some guidance within our ordinances so we can make these judgment calls, but we need the guidance of something in the ordinances that we base our decision on as to how we found something is compatible with what our zoning says.
So what do we do? Because we have campgrounds in front of us and we don't have that. We don't have that answer.
This conversation's not for our present applications. We live
I
with
know,
what we have.
right.
And that's how we view it. So this doesn't affect the present application that's before us because they're applied under the existing rules and that's what we're going to review it on.
Right, correct. And
forward-
they're bending over backwards to work with the people, I understand. But we need to get some definitions.
That's my point.
What struck me when I was looking around at this, why don't other towns have a definition for light commercial?
They don't use the word light commercial, so they don't have to define it. I've done a lot of looking too.
Because there's only one backside of the island, that's us. And we kind of like that, I guess.
Kind of, now correct me, but what I'm hearing from you guys is, except for Jeff, I'm kind of hearing that we concentrate on campground standards and possibly a definition for light commercial at this point. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would say that I'm feeling pretty in support of clarifying, defining light commercial. I haven't fully wrapped my head around the campground standards piece. And didn't we make some changes to that at town meeting in May? In terms of like fire pits and
Yes.
maybe even like buffer.
And we went to the 50-foot rather than 25-foot
Right.
buffer zone.
Right.
Trash
So-
cans, the fire pits, and
Yeah.
there was something else that, we clarified the buffer, where the buffering standards come from in the
Right.
ordinance, I believe, right, Jesse?
Yes.
And so I guess I'm not quite clear what the other campground standards that we might impose or might add would be.
Right,
Could we not ask James to give us some suggestions as to ways of looking at these two issues? And so we're all lay people here and we could have professional available to us to give us some suggestions from his expertise as to how we can look at these two issues. We don't have to do any of it, but at least we can start thinking about and be more directed and be focused.
that's true. But would James be able to get back to us with that? He's already under the deadline for the site plan review ordinance, moving that in. And it sounds like he can barely get that in on time for us to review. I don't know whether he can do all this.
I'll know better when I talk to him next week.
Okay.
Let's not
okay.
answer for him. Let's let him answer for him.
I had two things that I wanted to discuss about that. I couldn't come up with a lot of ideas either, but we did discuss a minimum size earlier, and we never came to the conclusion whether a minimum number of acres to have a campground. In other words, you can't have a 1 acre campground or a half-acre campground, maybe, and maybe some towns have like 2 or 5 acres, 10 acres. I think Lemoyne has a 20 acre, which seems a little too large. And the other thing, I found that some require an annual, we're going to have a full-time CEO at some point here, that some require an annual inspection by the code enforcement officer, which I think is a good idea. That case, the code enforcement officer could see if there are any violations going on or any changes. I'm not speaking of anything before us right now, but let's say one thing we've struggled with in the past is residential units, that some of these cabins or whatever are not residential dwelling units because they don't have cooking facilities. It'd be a very easy job to, after an application is approved, to add cooking facilities and make it a residential dwelling unit undercover, if you will, at some point. So I think it might be an annual inspection. It wouldn't take much. We don't have that many campgrounds. How long would it take for the CEO to do it? You know, they can have it all done in a day, basically. Those are the two things that I had: the minimum size or of a campground and the annual inspection. I couldn't come up with any other write-off.
Jesse, we talked last meeting that we don't need to get specific drafting done before we go through the public notice of changes. Is that correct?
You don't need to have the draft done before you schedule the public hearing. But depending on when it is, you would need to make your decision that night that you have the public hearing. You
Yeah.
have to have it final by the end of that meeting.
Obviously.
Yeah.
However, so if, given, we don't know what James's schedule is, but given that we can go forward in the next meeting or whenever and schedule our public hearing and work on these couple issues that have been there's some consensus here that we can look at these and have something ready for that public hearing. With
Jesse's trying to find out the date. When is that date?
I was guessing that.
What gave it away? The calendar he was looking at?
Back of his head, I believe.
Which office are you in, Jesse? Are you in your new office?
Yes.
Oh, that's why the calendar's in a different spot. Okay.
He's got a window behind him now.
Yeah, look at that. He's moving up in the world.
Hey, guys.
And of course, if we can't meet that November deadline, we could ask for a special town meeting, although I'm not sure whether the board will go for it. The Board of Selectmen will go for that and probably want to put it off until May.
I do feel I like to avoid another town meeting, going to the point of confusing voters and what we're doing and so forth. So to keep it in a natural pattern, if we can make November, that's wonderful. But if we have to put off to May, so be it. It's better than not doing anything at all. And I think Lawson raised a very good point of we want to make sure everyone understands how we're going forward and what we're trying to address, and make it in a business as usual approach.
Okay. So in order to have a public hearing on the 27th of July, you would have to schedule that tonight. Because we
And
need
that's the
to,
latest we could do it?
you can do one in August. The select board, if the select board has another meeting, that gave you until the end of August, which they agreed to if you wanted to pursue that route.
And our first meeting in August would be the 10th,
Yes.
same night
Yeah,
as
but
the
we-
public hearing for the campground.
Yeah, I don't think it's realistic to do both of those in the same night.
I agree.
So we could take a later date.
So we're gonna have to go for the 27th, right? Or we schedule an extra meeting.
Because the 24th of August would be too late.
I thought we could do it by the end of August.
That's the
Deb, is it-
selectmen. have
Well,
to-
yeah, if the selectmen have one on the 30th, then you could do it the 24th.
Okay,
Okay. So
Yeah.
we don't necessarily need to schedule a public hearing tonight then.
No, if you're shooting for the August 24th, then you can schedule it at one of your next July meetings.
Okay. And we know what's on the table for our next meeting. Probably the paving project, we know that, but
That's it at this point.
so that's be a good time to get something wrapped up, huh?
Mhm. Yep.
are we going to present to James these couple issues and see if he can get back to some feedback that we can wrestle with?
Yeah, I've been taking notes, so I'll talk to him next week when he's back in the office.
Okay, what specifically are we going to ask James for? Mr.
Let's-
Note Taker, Jesse.
I had taken down a definition or suggestions on light commercial and suggestions on campground, either definitions, a better definition or standards that he would recommend.
That sound good to everybody?
Yes,
Yes.
Right. Jesse, you need a motion on that now?
Sure.
Okay. Any other discussion? Anybody want to raise anything else before I ask for a motion? Okay, hearing nothing. I'll take a motion to request that the town attorney look over those two issues. Jeff, you want to make the motion?
I move that we ask Jesse to ask the town attorney to look at ways of addressing a possible definition of light commercial and campgrounds that would be have more definitions or standards for each.
A second.
Okay, there's a motion and second on the table to have Jesse ask the town attorney to look into definitions for light commercial and looking at the campground standards. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. Marjorie?
We're
Marjorie,
just on mute and on the phone, it looks like.
okay. Lawson?
Yes.
Brett?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes,
Marjorie? Marjorie?
Here,
Here she comes. You're muted.
I know,
Okay.
sorry.
We have a motion on the table. We're asking what you're voting, yes or no?
Yes,
Okay, myself, yes. Unanimous, okay. We all set there? We'll move on. Some of you folks may not know, this is Marjorie's last meeting. Like to wish her well and thank her for her service. She was not reappointed by the selectmen last night. Brett was reappointed. Congratulations, I think, Brett. And we have a new member, Beth Gott, who will be joining us at the first meeting in July. Okay, let's set that date for the next meeting. I'll take a motion to set it for July, 13th. And we want to do it by Zoom? Go ahead,
Well, I was gonna ask the same question. Yeah,
about Zoom.
yeah.
Yeah, do we want to do it as Zoom or in person? Jesse suggested Zoom in his suggested motion, but
Zoom is fine with me.
Yeah.
I
go ahead.
I don't know, I guess I'm just thinking about a new planning board member, and it might be easier for Beth to sort of learn, get connected, and for us to be able to meet her in person. It might be nice to do it in person. If that might, I don't know, I'm thinking about I'm very grateful that I did not have to start on the planning board virtually, even though we were masked, and I guess we weren't masked at the beginning. I guess we had like a few
Like
meetings.
one.
Well, yeah, in
In public
person.
hearings, for Pointy Head, we were masked, I remember. And some of
Okay.
those meetings we were too. Yeah, that's right.
Anyway, I'm glad that we got to have in-person meetings for at least a little bit when I was starting. And so I was thinking that having a new planning board member come on might be a nice time to be back in person.
Selectmen have been meeting in person. The Comprehensive Plan Task Force has been meeting in person. We also have a new Delta variant. So I don't know, I have mixed feelings about it. I'd be happy to meet in person. And Jesse, we could, even if someone on the board preferred to do it virtually, we could still do that,
Yep.
right? Yeah.
Yep.
So what's the board's wish?
I think we should continue in Zoom with these meetings until we get through the summer.
I'm fine meeting in person.
I
Lawson?
like meeting in Zoom.
You won't even be here.
I don't care. You know, you can do the animals, the bird, and the whole bit.
Lawson?
I guess my preference would be to be in person, but I'm also feeling pretty flexible and happy to go
Well,
along with.
We
Whatever
can
we
meet in
want.
person and we can have Jeff attend virtually if he's okay with that. Of
I'm okay with that.
course, we'll miss him.
Yep.
No, you won't.
Okay. I'll take a motion to that effect, okay?
I'll make a motion that we set our next meeting for July 13th in person at the Harvey Kelly Room.
6 o'clock,
Should we do it at our old time, which was 6 o'clock?
regular time, yes.
Regular time, 6 o'clock,
Yes, 6 o'clock, yeah.
6 o'clock PM. And
Okay.
and if a planning board member wants to Zoom in, to coordinate that with Jesse. Jesse can
Okay,
set up
I'll
a-
second that motion to move things along here. Any discussion?
Yes, just a quick question. These rules around this COVID stuff change so rapidly. Is there any restriction on how many people can be in the audience in these meetings at this time, or are we back to things as usual?
It's
Yeah,
back
full
to
cap-
things as usual.
Full capacity town meeting, full capacity soccer games and music concerts.
So,
Not that-
so we could pack the room up to the fire chief's limit.
Right, yes.
If it looks like it's going to be too crowded, which I don't think it is for the 13th. I really
No.
doubt if anybody will attend, actually. We can move it. I have the authority as chairman, well, if I still remain chairman, to move it over to the community center.
Uh,
Little bit of notice.
Jesse, I note that we have a lot of people in attendance by Zoom tonight,
Mhm,
even past the hot topic.
mhm.
Would they still be able to attend by Zoom, or if we go live, or we gonna have Zoom coverage for meetings if we're starting meeting live?
Typically, we haven't. Back when we did it before, it was just you that was on there.
I think there'd be
Usually,
bandwidth issues, wouldn't there? Or not? Maybe not.
I mean,
no,
Jesse's in the town office right now. It'll be the same
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
bandwidth,
it would just, I'd have to see if I could do 2 laptops or not, because we usually put yours up on the counter so that you can see the audience, and therefore I can't monitor the Zoom when it's up there. So if I can get the second one connected, which I should be able to, then I could monitor the Zoom. We can try it out.
Are the select board meetings broadcast live to YouTube, or is it just after the fact that they're up?
After it's uploaded the next day.
Okay. Because I do like the increased accessibility
Mhm.
that Zoom provides to the public.
I agree with you, Lawson.
But there'll be no comments, right? So basically, even if they were able to watch it later, you'd have the same,
It's more or less the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And so the people that watch on, like with Jeff, can add a comment to a meeting.
Yeah. And that seems to make sense to me that like, if you want to comment it for a public hearing, I think it would be different. I mean, like for a
Right.
typical meeting that's not a public hearing. I think a public hearing, I'd want to be more conscientious about
Yep.
making sure that we can hear the public.
We could try it. And if it doesn't work, the recording will be uploaded the next day. So they'll still have access to it. But we can see if we can get it live during it.
Great.
We should be able to.
We have confidence in you, Jesse.
okay. We all set there then? Okay, maybe, who
vote?
made the who
I
made the
made-
motion?
I made a motion and
Okay,
you seconded, Mark,
okay.
but I don't think we voted yet.
Yeah, so, but the motion was just to hold it in person at the Harvey Kelly Meeting Room at 6 o'clock on the 13th.
Yep.
And also make it available by Zoom,
Yes.
correct?
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay, good enough. Take a vote. Lawson,
Yes.
Brett,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Marjorie,
Yes.
myself, yes, okay. And Marjorie, since this is your last meeting, I know you'd like to do the honors. I'll take a motion to adjourn,
That's a wrap.
but that's not a motion.
I move that we adjourn.
I second, Marjorie.
Okay, thanks,
Thank you,
folks.
Lawson.
Motion is second on the table to adjourn. Jeff,
Aye.
Brett,
Yes.
Lawson,
Yes.
Laura, Marjorie,
Yes.
myself, yes. Okay, well, thanks, folks. Okay, we'll see you
Thank
you.
next time.